The more complex something is, the more opportunity there is for error. And in May of 2019, MIT declared Magic the Gathering the most complex game in the world. The simplest game of Magic is still a labyrinth of branching decision trees, and even the most expert players are bound to make some wrong turns. The real problem is when we find ourselves going in circles, making the same mistakes with the same cards over and over again. Lucky for you, we here at the Command Zone are experts on making mistakes, from strategic blunders to rules confusion to outright misreading the cards. So today, let us be your guides through this maze as we shine a light on the cards you're playing wrong.
Greetings, humans. You have entered the Command Zone, your destination for all aspects of Elder Dragon Highlander. Enjoy your stay.
Doing it right, everybody will be casting and we're feeling it right. Everybody will be casting and we're doing it right. Everybody will be casting and we're doing it right. Everybody will be casting and we're doing it right. And we're doing it right. And we are doing it live. Actually, no, we're not live.
Man, singing a Daft Punk song is ambitious.
Yeah, because we don't sound like robots, apparently.
Well, they process the voice. Maybe the editors could process our voice. I'm assuming that they auto-tuned that and made it sound good, right?
Hopefully. If they sound like that in real life, I would run away. What's up, everyone? You're watching / listening to the Command Zone podcast. I'm one of your hosts today, Jimmy Wong.
How's it? It's Josh Lee Kwai. All right, so a little bit of a clickbaity title, I will admit. But, anybody who's played Commander for a while will just know that there are certain cards that players just often get wrong. And in fact, certain cards that even me to this day will consistently still get wrong after you learn how it works.
Yeah, and this happens on every level. This will happen on someone being like, no, trample doesn't work like that. It's like, well, actually, 1 point of death touch trample, it always happens. There's something where people, oh darn, I wasn't doing that right.
And there are cards that just over the years, they just templated in weird ways because Magic's been around for a long time, especially old cards. It's like, why did they choose to word it like that? Which is very confusing. And there's also cards that people just play incorrectly. They understand how it works, but you're just often, especially new players or less experienced players, you're like, you do understand how that works, but I don't think you're fully realizing the best, most optimal way to play that.
Yeah, you should be doing that at instant speed, not just on your turn, all that sort of stuff, as well as, hey, that card doesn't work like that.
Yeah. All right. So today's episode is the cards you're playing wrong. But before we get into it, we got to talk about our sponsors. ChannelFireball.com/command. That is the place you want to go to pick up your Magic products, singles, anything at all. Streets of New Capenna has just hit the streets. We've got Commander Legends, Baldur's Gate on the horizon.
I want Unfinity.
Well, Unfinity is probably September or something. What did they announce?
Darn.
It's later this year, so you probably can't pre-order that quite yet. But the Channel Fireball Marketplace is really the best place to go to get all of your Magic cards, especially sealed product. They have really great prices I've found on that. So channelfireball.com/command, the affiliate link you want to use. And if you forget to use that affiliate link, you can just type in the code command at checkout, and it still applies and still helps out all of our content.
And a really big announcement.
Yep.
We're going to CommandFest. Woohoo! In Las Vegas. This is June 10th to the 12th. It's right around the corner. Almost the entire office is going.
Yeah, we've got I think it's 16 or 17 people from our crew, including Jimmy and I, going to be at CommandFest. It's exciting to have live events be back. Channel Fireball is hosting it. And these things are always a blast. We've been to many of them over the years, obviously not in the last couple of years, but they are super, super fun. If you can make it out at all, we would highly recommend it. Also, you have a chance to get in games with Jimmy and I because we will be in the convention hall looking for Commander games.
Yeah, you're going to meet the rest of our staff as well that are there, and it's just also an amazing event, so make sure you check it out. They're also doing CommandFest around the country, so this isn't the only one. You can find all that stuff always in the Show More box below the video.
Yeah, we'll put a link down there.
Yep, and of course, our other sponsor is Ultra Pro. Ultra Pro is a brand new shop at shop.ultrapro.com/command. Type that, it's our affiliate link, just like Channel Fireball, and you will shop from a huge array of Ultra Pro products. We're talking playmats, deck boxes, sleeves, you name it. They've got amazing pieces of art. They also have just so much stuff in their backlog. You may browse that site and go, wow, there's so much stuff I just missed. I need this playmat right now. Well, you can do that by entering in our promo code when you go to the URL. So shop.ultrapro.com/command. Also, you can just go buy Ultra Pro products from your stores. We love Ultra Pro.
Yeah, of course, support your LGS if you see the product there. But we hear all the time from people, because there's so many different products from Ultra Pro, that they go into their LGS and they're like, they don't carry this, or they don't have this, or they're sold out of that. So shop.ultrapro.com/command is a way to go to the source if you can't find it at your LGS and still be able to, maybe you picked up the playmat, but they don't have the sleeves and the deck box that match. Well, hopefully the Ultra Pro shop will have that for you.
Yep.
And of course, the final way to support all of our content is directly if you go to patreon.com/ patreon.com/command zone. We've recently overhauled the entire Patreon. It's been upgraded. Yeah, there's a ton more perks, and there's a new merch store available through there. You can get discounts. There's all kinds of bonus content, exclusive content, and also we've just started this program. And in fact, I think the time you're listening to this, the first one's already happened.
Oh, yeah.
Where there's certain dates every single month where Jimmy, myself, other members of our crew are going to be on Spell Table playing Commander games with our community via Discord. So if you want to get in on that action, patreon.com/command zone also just supports all of our content.
Yep, and we shout out one lucky patron every single episode. So this episode is dedicated to Bobby Bickford.
Bobby, you rock.
That's a really cool name.
All right, let's get into the main topic here. Cards you're playing wrong. So we're going to list a bunch of cards here and a couple of mechanics. You know how that goes. And we found that they generally kind of fall into two categories. One is wrong, quote unquote, in regards to the rules. And these are cards that players just sort of often don't understand how certain cards work. Full disclosure, a couple of these are cards we have made mistakes on our own gameplay videos about with judges sitting right there.
Yeah,
so
there'll be a couple, and it's so easy to overlook some of these small things, especially when you're playing with old cards, like you said earlier. You have to go to Gatherer or find the Oracle text of what it is now, because sometimes you may have been playing something entirely wrong.
Yeah, so again, as usual, not calling anybody dumb or stupid. This is just informative, so hopefully that you can learn how they work and use them better in the future. But if you've messed them up, we've all messed them up, so nobody should feel bad.
The second way is, of course, if it's wrong in regards to, and this is sort of the broader one, how you're playing it inside the game itself. Commander is a very different format than one-on-one, and a lot of cards designed for one-on-one play differently, actually, in a multiplayer format, and sometimes play patterns when you're doing something the way you're sequencing it. That's a huge area, and this is probably the biggest one where people make mistakes and don't even realize it.
Yeah, these are more like decision-based, quote-unquote, wrong, play pattern wrong. Mm-hmm. You're doing that wrong. It's more subjective, obviously. And again, we're not calling anybody dumb, but I think there are certain cards that you see, people play often, and you're like, that's not how I think you should probably play that card. So quick examples, just to sort of differentiate these. The example of like wrong rules would be something maybe like Mana Vault. We pulled our team here at the Command Zone just to see, hey, we're doing this topic. Here's what we've been thinking about. Anything good you've got to throw in the mix, let's hear it. And one of the ones Gaurav brought up was, he said early on when he was, still new to the format, he was playing Mana Vault wrong because he was untapping it for 4 mana whenever he felt like it. And let me read the card. Mana Vault's a 1 mana artifact. It says, Mana Vault doesn't untap during your untap step. You can tap it to add 3 colorless to your mana pool. And it says, at the beginning of your upkeep, you may pay 4. If you do untap Mana Vault, at the beginning of your draw step, if Mana Vault is tapped, it deals 1 damage to you. So you can only untap Mana Vault during your upkeep. It's a trigger that goes on the stack at the beginning of your upkeep. You can't just choose, on the end step before your turn or during your main phase to untap it.
Yeah, this is a classic, has a lot of old kind of sounding text on it, and they updated to make it work, but it's very confusing, because if you're playing online, you'll see the trigger come up. Oh, I should untap Mana Vault right now? If I can't, okay, I'm just going to leave it tapped. And then you take a damage on your next phase. A lot of people treat it like it's Basalt Monolith or Grim Monolith, which allows you to pump the mana into it at any point to untap it. This is not the same. But, of course, the upside is you get a 1 mana artifact that taps for 3 the turn it comes down.
Yeah, I like the comparison to Grim Monolith and Basalt Monolith, and I think that's often where these rules misinterpretations or confusion come from, because your brain kind of says, oh, there's this other effect that's very similar, and that's how that works, and it wants to shortcut everything to work that way, when there's a lot of nuance where it's like, okay, this card's similar to those cards, but doesn't work in the exact same way. Yeah,
you'll see that a lot these days with cards that say activate as a sorcery only or at sorcery speed only, whereas a lot, that only has been added like in the past 2 or 3 years, and everything before that with an activate ability is like, oh, this is an instant speed thing, so that's just more stuff to look out for.
Or activate only during your turn, which is different than activate only as a sorcery, right?
Yeah, as a sorcery speed, you can do it during your combat step.
But those feel like they should be the same. Okay, but and then an example of people making quote-unquote playing cards wrong, that's more like a decision-based play pattern thing, not a rules thing, is I think like the Sword ofs. You often see people sort of suboptimally sequence Sword ofs. And so I think it's generally incorrect, and it depends on a number of factors, but to play your sword and pass the turn without equipping and swinging in the same turn. So if you've got Sword of Feast and Famine, Hearth and Home, Fire and Ice, in general, you don't want to telegraph that play coming. You want to get your value off of it. And you also want to get it onto a creature the same turn you play it to get the protection for that creature. So it's usually correct to wait until you have 5 mana available or you can cheat it in somehow and whatever, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Rather than going like,
turn 3, play
turn 3, please Sword of Feast and Bam, pass turn.
Yeah, and you have like a Birds of Paradise out or something or whatever. Yeah, because a lot of people would just look at that and go, well, I'll hold up 2 mana for my bounce spell now, or 1 mana for my Path to Exile. Whereas they could have been just like, all right, turn 4 or whatever, no problem. I'll tap out, play my thing, pass turn, and you go, great, here's my 5 mana. Everyone's tapped out because they're just trying to accelerate the board state. Now I can play this, get the effect, equip it safely, and go to town.
Yeah, because the player, especially the one that's in black and green, and you've got a Sword of Feast and Famine out, is
oh no, that thing's coming right at me.
Yeah, it's definitely coming for me. Once he gets it, onto the creature, I can never touch it. And you telegraph a moment where they can blow you out tempo wise, because you go, especially Sword of Feast and Famine, right?
Yeah, that's the most dangerous one for sure.
Yeah, you're incentivized to use all of your mana and then swing so you can untap it. So if you go, cast something, go to equip Sword of Feast and Famine, they remove the target in response. They can sort of time walk you. You use the mana already.
Yeah.
And you don't get the effect.
Yeah, and you're playing your whole turn around the fact that you're going to untap those lands too.
Yeah, or do the 2 damage with the Fire and Ice, or whatever it was, or blink your thing. So it's very important to sequence sort ofs properly. And I'm not saying you never would ever, just play it out and pass the turn. But in general, if you have any other play, I think it's correct to wait until you can do it and then equip it and then swing with it all in the same turn. And ideally at a moment where you look around and you go, it's unlikely anyone's going to be able to interact here because they didn't see this coming.
Yeah, it's kind of similar how we talked to how Haste was an underrated mechanic.
Oh, there you go.
Because if you can get something going that same turn and people can't see it coming, that's why it's important to play the sword out when you can equip it safely.
Okay, so obviously we're going to go through a lot more here, but those are kind of the 2 categories they're going to fall into. And speaking of rules, there is a card, and this is one of the ones we've gotten wrong on our own gameplay videos.
I get it wrong even in my regular life.
I literally, when we were doing this episode, I was like, I got to read this again to make sure that I still know, I'm still correct about it. Because you play with it, and then, you might go a month, 2 months, 3 months without really seeing it, and then you're like, wait, is it this way or that way? So it is...
Moraug, Fury of Akum. It's 4 red for a 6/6 Minotaur warrior. It's legendary. It could be your commander. All right, so each creature you control gets +1/+0 for each time it has attacked this turn. Pretty simple. Now, the landfall, whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, if it's your main phase, there's an additional combat phase after this phase. At the beginning of that combat, untap all creatures you control. Okay, so... It seems simple, right? Haha, great. Play Moraug, play a land, maybe even a fetch land, and blammo, I'm going to get an extra combat phase.
The important, the thing that screws this up big time is when the untapping happens.
Yeah.
So the landfall will cause the extra combat to happen.
No matter what, when you play it. However, the untapping is, you don't want to do this in your first main phase, if that makes sense. Because a big thing about extra combats is that it allows you to untap all your creatures and go again. Which means that if your creatures are untapped and you play a land with Moraug, then you're going to combat with your creatures untapped, and then you're going to get the untap clause, but you're not actually getting, you'll attack and then you have regular combat, but you're not going to be able to untap your creatures again.
Right, because it untaps it at the beginning of that extra combat. Right?
Yeah. It doesn't say untap all creatures. After this main phase, there is another combat phase, which is how like old aggravated assault type things work.
Yeah, basically most of the old extra combat steps say either after this combat, there's an additional combat, untap all your creatures.
Yeah.
Or they just say, the first thing they say is untap all creatures. There's another combat now. This one is projecting a combat into the future where at the beginning of that combat, you will untap. So if you have Moraug out, and you play a land and then go to combat,
it's going to say untap all your creatures, and you're like, oh crap.
They were already untapped, but it's just like that's the next thing that happens is the extra combat. You don't go to regular combat and then extra combat.
Yep.
So you untap all your creatures, attack, and then you're like, go to regular combat, but my creatures are still tapped now because I didn't get an untap clause on my regular combat. So the correct way to play Moraug is to hit your landfall triggers in your second main so that you'll get the untap and you've already gone through your regular attack. And also another weird thing about Moraug is most extra turn spells say after this phase...
Extra combat phase, You get another...
Main phase.
Yeah.
Not Moraug. So if you go to your extra combats and you've already gone to your regular combat and gone to your second main, you'll go extra Moraug combat straight to end step. You will not get a main phase in between that extra combat and the end step.
Yeah, do you want to read like an older card and just see how they phrase it? Because this is the thing. When I first read this, I was like, this is simple, easy. Play lands, get extra combats, have more main phases.
Why doesn't it just work like all the other ones? We'll talk about that in a second. Okay, so Aggravated Assault is a 2 and a red enchantment. It says untap all you pay 3 red, untap all creatures you control. After this phase, there is an additional combat phase followed by an additional main phase. Play this ability only time you could play a sorcery.
Yeah, so it's got that sorcery speed clause on it. But the nice thing is that it says untap your creatures, and then here's what's going to happen. Moraug says you're going to get this extra combat, and when that combat starts, then you untap your creatures and go.
Yeah.
So it almost flips it halfway.
Scourge of the Throne is another one we see a lot. This one says whenever Scourge of the Throne attacks for the first time each turn, if it's attacking the player with the most life or tied for the most life, untap all attacking creatures. After this phase, there's an additional combat phase.
Yep. So that, again, does not skip over your second main phase because you can use in their first combat. Treasure Stone plays, you attack, you get another combat phase, and then you go to your second main.
It can only happen during your combat phase because when you attack, it's an attack trigger.
And for the first time, so you can't go infinite with it with extra attack triggers and all that stuff.
Yeah. So Moraug, very confusing. And I think a thing we should note here, too, it's easy to sort of forget that first clause from Moraug does apply to all the combats you've had. Mm-hmm. So on the first attack, they all get +1/+0. On the second attack, they'll all be +2/+0. If you had a fetch land or something on the third attack, they'd be +3/+0.
Yeah, you have to track all of that.
Yeah, because it counts how many times you've attacked in a turn. I got to ask, Jimmy, why do you think they worded this card so confusingly?
I think it's because it's a fetch land, it's a landfall based thing, and there's a lot of ways to get a ton of value out of that. So I think they're trying to nerf it. Because landfall is an easy thing to hit triggers with. Like Scourge of the Throne, you have to have a player that has more life than you. At a certain point, if you keep attacking them, they're not going to have more life than you. And
it says the first time you attack each turn.
You only do it once.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think for Moraug, it's more that they're trying to balance it in a way that you can't just you're playing it in your Omnath deck or whatever, and you're just going to go have all these infinite combat steps and more main phases. I think they want to.
But if you do it in your second main, you still will get the additionals. Like if you go attack with everything's tapped now. Play a fetch land, crack it. That's 2 landfall triggers, which Moraug will see both. So at the beginning of the first one, you'll untap and attack. And at the beginning of the second one, you'll untap and attack. So multiple landfalls still work with it.
Yeah, I honestly don't know.
I think it was just the professional player mindset, like getting too involved in this, because you generally don't want to play your lands before you attack.
I see. Yeah.
You know, and you don't want to in generally in 1v1, it's like go to attacks first and then do everything in your second main phase.
Yeah.
And so they didn't want to make it so like you had to play your land before combat, even though like most casuals, that's just how we play, right? We're mostly like play my land, cast stuff. Oh yeah, go to attack. Like we're not.
I'm okay with playing a land in your first main, but yeah, it's interesting. I honestly don't know. It's maybe they just forgot to look at Aggravated Assault and other similar cards when they made this one, and that's just how they decided to do it.
It is weird also that there's no main phase after the extra ones. Like there's not really a great advantage to having a third or a fourth main phase because you could have just done that stuff in your second.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I feel like they're doing this to rein the power back in a little bit because of that, but it also doesn't make a huge difference. It just makes it a very confusing card.
Yeah, I guess with sort of Feast of Famine, there is an advantage to having a third
additional main phase. Yeah, because you can just go and cast more stuff and all that stuff.
Yeah. This whole thing reminded me, and I don't know why, but do you remember there's this moment that's kind of like one of the biggest misplays in like Pro Tour history?
It's really sad.
So I just wanted to bring it up because it is interesting. It's the Hazoret misplay from Pro Tour Hour of Devastation, which was in 2017. There was this famous play where Yam Wing Chung was playing against Paulo Vitor Dama de Rosa.
Had him on the ropes, was going to win if he just was able to swing.
Yeah, he top decked a card that was basically like a lightning bolt, which would deal 3 damage to Paulo. Then he would be able to swing with his Hazoret, and then he had a Sorcery Suit card to burn him out for the rest of the way. I believe that's how it went. We may be getting some of the details wrong. But what he accidentally did was when he drew the card, he went to combat straight away, and Hazoret, and Hazoret reads is not or can't attack or block unless you have 1 or fewer cards in hand. So he had 2 cards in hand, and once you've gone to combat, there's no moment to cast a card and get yourself down below where Hazoret will see it and still be able to attack.
Yeah.
So he just wasn't able to attack with Hazoret, which left him, 5 points short or whatever of winning the game, winning the match. I think it was the semifinals.
It was the match he would have taken to the finals, I believe.
Yeah, and Paolo ended up winning the whole thing, I believe, too. So
yeah,
for some reason, that like little conundrum or that little snafu with like when exactly in the phase you want to do stuff reminded me of the Moraug thing.
Yeah, obviously in professional settings, you can't go to combat. Wait, hold on, never mind. Let's take it back a notch. So in casual games with Moraug, you may be able to get away with more with that, but it's a good comparison, I think, because it's like, don't go to combat unless you know you need to think about your whole turn.
It does, and I know it's a sort of a heart-wrenching moment, but it does also make me feel better in some ways that like even the pros at the highest level do make some of the mistakes that we make at casual.
I think it was
where you play the lands out of order or whatever, you know?
For Yemwing Chan, I think it was really sad too because he was relatively new. It was like one of his first pro tours too, and he was really like he was doing had an incredible run, and everyone was so stoked for him. So to have it end like that was kind of heart crushing, soul crushing.
Yeah, for sure. All right.
Okay.
Okay, let's go to the next card that you're playing wrong.
Not me. This one, I've never played this card wrong. I'm always doing it. But there's actually many ways to play this card wrong. It's Sylvan Library, and it's not necessarily a rules thing. I will say if you're playing an old Sylvan Library, get a phone out, look up the most recent version and read the text off that instead of trying to read the old text when you're trying to process it.
But most people understand how it works.
Yeah, most people understand how it works.
So I'll read it, though, for those that maybe haven't seen it or whatever. It's Sylvan Library, 1 and a green for an enchantment. At the beginning of your draw step, you may draw 2 additional cards. If you do, choose 2 cards in your hand drawn this turn. For each of those cards, pay 4 life or put the card on top of your library. So you basically look at the top 3 cards. You're going to get 1 for sure, just like you normally would, but it's the best out of the 3. And then for each other one, if you want to keep the other 2, you'll pay 8 life, or if you want to keep just one of them, you'll pay 4 life. And then you do get to choose the order you put them back.
Yeah, so that's a big thing. One, it's kind of like a semi-scry. If you do not want to draw the other cards, you can put them back in a certain order. But another thing I constantly see people do is they just don't draw the cards. They're like, you know what? I don't need this right now. And almost always, that's wrong.
Yeah, this is the way I think that people are playing it wrong. You should be drawing the cards, especially the first time that you Sylvan Library. And I think people look at the cards, and a lot of times it's like, oh, even if it's, let's say it's the worst 3 cards you could think of. Either it's like 3 8-drops or it's 3 lands, something like that, where it's just like, I don't want all 3 of them.
Yeah, I don't need them. I can't even use them.
Why would I pay 8 life to get 3 cards into my hand when I don't want any of them? Here's why. Because you are more quickly getting to the cards underneath those cards by paying the life right now to put them into your hand. And I think that's not thought about it enough. Because imagine you do this. It's 3 lands. You go, boom. Okay, 3 lands. I don't want all 3 of those. I'm going to take 1. I have to put 2 lands back on top of my deck, which means next turn when I Sylvan Library, I'm really only looking at one new card.
Yeah.
What if that's a land? You will be like, geez, I wish I just drew all 3 of the lands so I could look at the next 3 cards down and start getting to the good cards and the gas in my deck.
Yeah. And we're in Commander. 8 life does seem like a lot. It's almost a quarter of your entire life total, but it still is. You get to, right? If you think about Sylvan Library in the first turn you use it, that's 3 cards into your hand, 8 life. The next turn you get to look at another 3 cards. That's 6 cards deep into your deck. That's crazy.
So in some respects, if you look at the 3 cards and you like them, you should draw them because you like those cards.
Yeah.
And if you look at the 3 cards and you don't like them, you should draw them so that you don't have to draw them next turn.
Again, yeah.
Yeah. So in either path, you should draw them. Now, what if... There are some things I think that alter this calculus a little bit, and I think it's okay to not draw all the cards when you've got some other synergy going on. I think the first one is...
Shuffle effects.
Yep.
So any way you can change the order of your library, either you're tutoring or you're doing a fetch land or any of those types of things that says shuffle your library on the card, then you have a case of being like, cool, I don't want to pay 8 life to draw 2 additional lands or 2 of my 10 drops, 8 drops, whatever. Instead, I'm going to shuffle it away, and I know I'm going to do that. And that way, the next turn, I have a chance to look at 3 new cards, and that's okay.
And now you've done the same thing. You've looked at 6 cards over the course of 2 turns, but you didn't pay the life because, you cracked a fetch land in there and just shuffled your, and presumably didn't get the exact same, 2 of the 3
Hopefully not. That would be wild.
Or you're not good at shuffling, maybe.
Yeah.
What about when you're at low life?
How low?
Yeah, I think that's the question.
Yeah, if this is going to take you under, I'd say like 10, then you are in striking distance of a billion different things in Commander. Either just straight burn sometimes, or even just a creature or 2 flyers. And at that point, when you're even, I would say like even when you're getting into the 20s range, like low, like the high teens, like 15, 16, 17 life, you have to be really careful because you are just putting yourself, it's not even that. it's like you do that, and then everyone now looks at you and go, wait a minute, you're actually killable, whereas before you weren't.
Yeah.
And that is a big shift change, too, because people may change their strategy to now knock you out because you've given them the opportunity to.
Yeah, I think it depends a lot on once you get, like you said, into the like mid-teens. Once I'm at like 16 or so, I'll start thinking about it. It depends on what the decks I'm playing against are doing. Are they likely to have some kind of burn or some kind of reach? Something I can't see that's going to come out of nowhere?
If someone's like playing like Winota, you definitely do not want to do it. Unless, again, you have just an immense board state and you can protect it, or the card you drew that you needed to draw was like a heroic intervention or whatever it is, right? Or just even a counterspell. But it's still scary.
Yeah, if they're likely to have burn, like they're playing an Obosh deck or something that's like going to have damage to you that is finite, that is not blockable, you wouldn't see it coming. Or they're going to have, maybe if they potentially have a lot of haste in their deck, then that's something I would watch out for. Obviously, if there's like a 6/6 flyer out that you cannot block, you're going to be careful. But I will say, once you're getting into the mid-teens, a lot of times the other players are getting kind of low, and you're at the point in the game where it's probably going to end soon anyway. So in those cases, it is often still correct to draw because you're not going to... the difference between 10 and 8 or 12 and 8 is not that big.
Yeah.
Somebody's going to win soon. You'd rather it be you, and the best way to secure the victory is probably to draw a card you don't have right now, because if you had it, you would already have won, right? So, so it can still be correct to draw down to 8 or even 4 life, considering that, like, hey, listen, I'm going to, whatever I die to is likely to kill me if I'm at 10 or if I'm at 4, and it won't make much of a difference.
All right, here's another one. What if drawing the 3 cards forces you by end of turn to discard 2 of them? Would you still do it?
Yeah, I think it just depends, because I'm looking at the cards, what they are. But by that philosophy of like, whatever it is, I want to get a little deeper. But as you get into later into the game, I think not as much. But I will often just draw the 3 cards off Sylvan Library blind the first time. Play it. I'm at 40, comes back. I'm just drawing all 3 cards. I'm not even going to worry about what they are. I'm just like, take 8, go to 32. I'm drawing them. I don't care, because I'm trying to look at more cards. If I have any graveyard synergy, the discard could be really, really good.
Also, it's kind of like looting. It's fine. We'll talk about looting later, but I think you should always be drawing those cards, even if you have to discard. Sometimes even if you're at low life, but almost always, especially in the early parts of the game, if you can.
If you are playing Sylvan Library in your decks and you're not drawing very often and we're scaring you, you're like, I don't want to hurt my life that much. A, maybe you shouldn't be playing that card. But B, I would also say, like, just try it a few times. Try drawing more cards than you feel comfortable with. And then at the end of the game, set yourself a little reminder to analyze and be like, did I lose that game because of the 8 life or the 12 life that I lost?
Yeah.
And a lot of times, that life loss is immaterial. They played a Crater Hoof, and if you were at 90, you would have lost.
Yeah.
And you would have rather had another card in hand and another chance at having Cyclonic Rift or whatever at the right moment.
Yep. And we always know that games often come down to who can draw and play the most cards out of their hand. Another rules-based thing with Sylvan Library is that you're actually drawing cards.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of cards like Impulse or whatever will say put a card into your hand as a result of the effect. Sylvan Library is a draw effect, so with like Teferi's Ageless Insight or Helmut's Archive, you're doubling up because you are drawing cards. So that's just another word to look out for, draw versus put into.
Oh, there's one other point that we didn't make that I also want to make, which is like, there's no guarantee that Sylvan Library will still be on your battlefield when it comes back to your turn.
Yeah, it's a pretty high priority enchantment to get rid of, I think, especially at higher power tables.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing more people playing just more destroy all enchantments type stuff, because there's just so many more powerful enchantments now than there used to be.
Yeah.
And so it very easily could be that you just do not have another opportunity to draw those cards with that life. And you could be sitting there on turn 6 being like, on turn 3, I really wish I'd drawn those 2 extra cards, because I'd have 2 more cards in my hand. Now I'd be 2 cards deeper into my deck. Whatever the top 2 cards in my deck are right now, I could have those.
Yeah.
And just Sylvan Library got removed, and I never got the chance to make that decision after the first couple of times. So, yeah.
All right. Oh, yeah?
Yeah, the next one's similar to this.
Very similar. It's also a card I've never made a mistake with.
I think when you've been reckless with it, I think it's been correct, though.
I think so, too.
Even if you can't be results-oriented. You can't say, well, I died, therefore I shouldn't have used the card in that way.
Yeah. It was more, I needed to find an answer to not die.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Am I going to do that with less cards or more cards? You may have guessed it. It's Necropotence.
So it's basically the same note. The way you're playing it wrong is you're just being too timid with Necropotence. You're not drawing enough cards with it.
Yep.
Do you want to read the card?
Yep. So it's black for an enchantment. People used to, by the way, just think this card sucked.
Yeah.
Just straight up, they were like, you know what? I don't need this card. And it used to be really...
I thought it sucked.
No, not sucked, but it was just like, I don't need to do this. I'd rather not. And like back in the day, I remember very specifically looking at Necropotence. It was really cheap, and everyone's like, nah, I don't want to play it. It's one of the most powerful cards in EDH.
That was good vamping while I figured out how to unlock the tablet. Good job.
Yeah, imagine if I just knew the card's text by memory. So black, it's an enchantment. Skip your draw step. Whenever you discard a card, exile that card from your graveyard, and then you can pay 1 life, exile the top card of your library face down, put that card into your hand at the beginning of your next end step. So you're not drawing anymore with this card. Anytime you discard a card, that card gets instantly exiled. But Necropotence allows you to pay basically 1 life for 1 card, conditionally that card goes into your hand. You're not drawing it, by the way. You're putting that card into your hand at the beginning of your next end step. So it's at your end of your turn. You have your discard phase after that, and then it's going to count how many cards you have down. You have to discard down to 7. So that's a big part of actually why I think people go, oh, you know what? I'm not going to do anything crazy with Necropotence this turn.
Yeah, because I've got 4 cards. I'm just going to draw 3.
Up to 7, 3 life.
Because I don't want to discard any. And you see this a lot. Play Necropotence, pay 3 life, put 3 cards aside. During end step, pick up the 3 cards, and now I have 7. Your turn.
Yeah. Also, they forget that, hey, you're not going to draw during your next draw step, so you're actually putting yourself down the card kind of there.
Yeah, you should just draw, 15, 20. You really
25.
should. Yeah. You should draw a lot.
39. No, don't draw 39.
That might be a
what
little
did I do
aggressive.
that one game in Game Nights? I think it was like
went
20.
down to like a couple
I think
lives.
it did like 20 something. Yeah. Because I was just
I'll
like,
go down
I'm
to
going
3.
to die if I don't do this. I still think it was the right choice.
Yeah, exactly. I think it was too. People are just too timid. And I agree with what you said. The fact that they might have to discard is really
and then it gets exiled. Oh no, it's going away forever.
But the best 7 cards out of your 20 cards in hand?
Yeah, imagine you got to partial Paris your hand after you play Necropotence then you look through half your deck or whatever it is, like 20 cards or whatever. That's nuts.
Yeah, I'm looking at 24 cards and picking the 7 best. My hand's going to be amazing.
Yeah, I'll have everything I need. And this is, again, another thing that I think people just don't like, which is the idea, and this is a fallacy, right? Oh, no, they milled me. That card, I needed that card to win. That card could have been any of the cards in your deck. It's better to not think about that part of it, but rather what you're putting into your hand.
Yeah, and also this is exacerbated by the fact that you don't get to look at the Necropotence cards at the time you pay the life and everything.
Yeah.
You go, I have to pick a number, put those aside, and then I look at them all. And then at that point, if I want to pay more life, I'm not putting those into my hand until my next end step. So a full rotation of the table. So it's better to just to go a little bit too far.
Yeah.
Just
Play Necropotence on your turn, activate it, and get the cards into your hand as soon as possible.
Get 15, get 20. Just boom, look at it. Because like I need a board wipe, I need counterspell, I need, whatever I need gas, I need, I need more mana, whatever it is that you need. If you only do 3 or 4 cards, unlikely to find. If you do 20 and your deck's built right, you're going to find some of those pieces.
Yeah, it's kind of like a tutor in a way. I'll play Necropotence and look around the table and go, what do I have to deal with? Otherwise, I'm going to die. How deep should I dig to try and find the thing that does it? Does my spell full of counterspells? Great, I'll do it for 15. I'll probably find one.
I think similarly to Sylvan Library too, there's nothing to say that Necropotence is still going to be there on your next turn. Now
you should be deleting this off the table as soon as possible in most cases.
Now you can activate in response. So if somebody, for the most part, if somebody goes Nature's Claim on your Necropotence,
right,
and it's during their turn or during somebody else's turn, and you already drew the 3 cards, so you didn't have to discard. You can go, okay, in response, I will pay 10 life and put 10 aside, but you're not getting those to your next end step.
Yeah,
and you're not doing that again. You're doing that the one time.
Yeah, but you get a draw step back, which is nice.
Yeah, I guess so.
I would say definitely if you're playing Necropotence, you need to have Reliquary Tower type effects in your deck as well, so that you don't need to necessarily discard. But even if you still have a max hand size of 7, you should be drawing as many as possible. You want, again, if someone told you, hey, right now I'm going to give you a choice. For 15 life, you can look at the next 15 cards of your library and sculpt your hand out of that. Only up to 7, I would go 100% yes.
Yeah, I like to think of it in terms of balance. Normally, we would see it costs mana and life. Look at like Greed. It's 2 mana and 2 life to draw 1 card.
Yeah.
So the rate on Necropotence is so pushed that
it's Yawgmoth's, what's it called? Bargain or whatever.
Yes.
Right? Which is banned.
It's so pushed that it's becoming broken. And when you're able to do broken things in Commander, you should do them. And so taking advantage of that, if you only draw 3 or 4 cards, you're not leaning into that brokenness enough. You're not taking advantage of how strong the card is. When you're drawing 10 or 15, 20 cards, now you're saying, I'm getting such a good rate on all of this that now that advantage that I'm gaining is, think of it this way. If I draw 20 cards, I basically gain like 20 mana and 20 life, according to what Greed or some other effect would have.
Oh, I see.
Would normally have me pay 40 mana, I suppose. That advantage that I'm accruing.
Yeah, again, Yawgmoth's Bargain is banned. Pay 1 life, draw a card, skip your draw step. Necropotence, very, very similar. Not banned.
Yeah, do it.
Do the math.
Do the math. All right.
And in general, 1 life per card is an extremely good rate.
Yeah,
right?
Incredible. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And 0 mana, by the way, once to do that after you play it. Okay.
So the next one is a grouping of cards, and this is a rules thing. I think a lot of people actually forget this rule.
Yeah,
or they don't play the cards correctly.
And actually, this is a very, I think, just general player thing, which is like, I see the most optimal way to do this, and I only want to do it that way.
Yeah. So it's the force of cards from the original Modern Horizon. So we're talking about stuff like force of negation, force of vigor, force of virtue. Do you want to read force of vigor, Jimmy?
Yeah, force of vigor, 2 green. Actually, I remember in game nights multiple times I've like, I played this wrong.
There's been 1 or 2 times, I think I've done it too, where we realized it and had to rewind because we played it incorrectly. You didn't actually end up seeing it on the final version.
Yeah.
But like a lot of times we will catch that stuff and be like, crap, okay, let's go back.
Big rules error. We can't have this. Yeah. 2 green for an instant. If it's not your turn, you may exile a green card from your hand rather than pay the spell's mana cost. And then you can destroy up to 2 target artifacts and or enchantments.
So there's one of these for every color. All of them have that clause where you can exile a card from your hand that shares a color with it to cast it for free, quote
unquote. Is the color, not just shares.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, that is the color of it.
Yeah, a green. No, I guess it shares makes sense too. Sorry.
And then the part that gets forgotten is that if it's your turn part.
Yeah, so if it's not your turn, you may cast a spell for free. Makes a lot of sense with Force of Negation. You're counterspelling someone else's thing when it's their turn or whatever. If it's your turn, you can't play it for free. You can't play on my turn, cast this thing, Josh, is a counterspell. You go, haha, Force of Negation, pitching this blue card with it.
Nope.
You just broke the rules.
Yeah. You can't do that during your turn. You have to pay the mana cost if it is your turn.
Yeah, it's got the force of name to it. People
Yep.
think of force of will. They maybe have played Legacy. They think, I can do this for free at any time. This card rocks. Or they might think like it's like Deadly Raw. Like
and the cards do rock.
Commander out. Yeah, the cards do rock. And for the most part, you're not playing them during your turn. Like Force of Vigor, you want to be casting this they all say instant. Well, sorry, 2 of them say instant on it.
Yeah.
So
one has flash.
That's why it's like, if it's my turn, I'm casting it. Still says, yeah, it's fine. I can do it for free. You can't do it like that.
Yeah, I think it is because of Force of Will. And also there's a bunch of series where it's like exile 2 cards, like Fury of the Horde.
Yeah,
play it for free. There's also like foil.
Commandeer, foil, all those cards, yeah.
And none of those have this if it's your turn clause. This is something I think they added to try and make it a little more fair. Like, how can we nerf this a little bit? But it just ends up being forgotten often just because it's different than how those other cards work, and our brain wants to shortcut it and just put those all in the same category of this is how all of these work.
Yeah.
But the new force ofs are subtly different.
Yep. So it goes.
All right, the next one's kind of similar. It is the Anger and Wonder series.
Yeah.
Anger and Wonder are the ones we see in Commander. There is also Brawn, Valor, and Filth. These are all there's one for each color. They're all the cards that say, like, if this creature is in your graveyard and you control a land of the type that forest for green, mountain for red, island for blue, then they give all of your creatures an ability. Anger is haste, Wonder is flying, Brawn is trample,
Valor is first strike, and black is swamp walk randomly. It's probably before they
Death
had...
Touch is too strong, probably.
It was probably before they had other things. Yeah, I guess Death Touch was around back then, but yeah, I don't know what it would be today if they reprinted it, made them new.
What?
Swamp Walk, yeah, good stuff. Rexiel's cheering in the background. Okay, so a lot of people think, I'm just going to ditch Anger, got Haste, go into combat, got him. And they're playing like all of the lands that none of them say the word mountain on them.
All dual lands, all utility lands. It's easy to forget. You also have to have that land in play that has the correct type.
Now, fortunately, it's not a basic forest or a basic land. You can just have a stomping ground, and that counts as a mountain or as a forest. So Brawn and Anger will trigger. But if you don't have that, let's say you just have a bunch of the 2-color lands, like the lands from Battle Bond and all that. They don't say land type, mountain, forest on it. They just say land. Those do not count for these cards, and you will not get the ability.
Yeah, bounce lands don't count, and obviously utility lands and things don't count. I've had games for sure where I get Anger in there and I realize, I don't have a mountain. Yeah. I'm in a 3-color deck and I do have 2 red available to me, but neither is from a mountain. One's a bounce land and one's And so that is something to really be aware of. And also, when you're playing against these cards,
make sure your opponent doesn't make the mistake as well.
And you can also sometimes turn off their thing with like a well-timed strip mine or something like that. So being aware, like, yes, you've got Anger in the graveyard, but there's only one mountain over there. Mm-hmm. A lot of times they'll be like, play this, go to combat. Okay, before combat, strip mine your 1 mountain. And they're like, okay, pass turn. They can't do what they thought they were going to do. Strip mine your 1 island. That's less. There tends to be more islands running around just because people want multiple islands because a lot of things cost blue. But
there's so much confusion around this too because people, I think, still are confused. Even great players between basic land type, a forest, a basic land. There's so many, right? If you look at like Boseiju, and you do this thing, and your opponent gets to get a land with a basic land type on it, they may think, oh, a basic land. There's like, no, you can get a triome with it. You can do a bunch of stuff. And for Braun and all that stuff, it's not just a forest producing land. You need to have a land that says forest in its land type.
Yep.
Or in the old dual lands case, they say it in the text, like this counts as a forest and whatever. But then if you errated it, it just, again, is in the land type. So it's a very easy, very, very easy thing to mess up.
I think Triomes have made these cards all a little bit better because we have one more easy to play, should be played in all decks of 3 colors or more that have land types on them. But still.
It was like the cycle lands that had from, I forget what set it was.
Yeah, there's the lands and the...
Amonkhet had those lands that had the land types on it. Yeah, but again, just make sure you have it. It says it in the top bar, land, dash, mountain, forest, whatever it is.
So this next card we're going to talk about that you're playing wrong, quote unquote, is actually because of a situation I ran into recently with anger. Somebody did this against me.
This is the first time I thought about this card in this way, and I went, oh no, I've been playing this card wrong.
I think that most people are playing this card correctly, but there is a corner case where maybe you're not even considering that as an option. So it's Noxious Revival, which is a very popular green card that people play in a lot of decks. It's a Phyrexian green mana, so you can either play 1 green or 2 life.
I'm paying 2 life every time.
It's an instant, and it says put target card from a graveyard on top of its owner's library. Now, people are often using this to get a key card from their own graveyard, put it on top of their library right before the draw step, and it becomes kind of a tutor from your library type of deal, which is very powerful, and you should probably be playing Noxious Revival if you're not. But there are fringe cases where, and I'm like you, I haven't thought about doing this that often.
Well, because it seems suboptimal. In fact, it most often is suboptimal.
But somebody did it to me recently, and it was on my anger.
Oh.
So I had an anger in my graveyard, and I was doing one of those turns where I'm like, I'm going to play this, and this. And
target card from a graveyard. Doesn't need to be your graveyard.
Yeah, so it was my Tim deck.
Oh,
and I went to like Staff of Domination on the stack, and it was pretty obvious that I was going to be able to win because of the amount of mana I could produce.
Yeah.
But I needed the creature. I think it was
have haste.
Yeah, I think it was Vizier of Tumbling Sands or maybe Face Stitcher.
An untapper, yeah.
It was because I played them both in the same turn, and I had a land that could tap for like 6 mana because I had a Market Festival on it and some other stuff.
Right, so untap it, untap everything, just go nuts.
Yeah, and they went, okay, in response, I will Noxious Revival your anger onto the top of your library.
And you had no way to draw it or get it back into the graveyard?
Nope. I mean, I was tapped out at that point. I was counting on tapping the Vizier of Tumbling Sands to untap that land, but now it doesn't have haste.
Yeah, so you had something on the stack and you couldn't do it.
Wow. Well, what I could do is I could untap the land, then activate the Staff of Domination to draw the card, but now I don't have enough mana to go off.
To do it again, yeah.
So I had no way to get anger back in the graveyard.
Jeez, it's like they just put a tiny little banana peel in your way, and you're like, whoop!
It was so smart. And so in that moment, I was like, oh yeah, Noxious Revival. It can target opponents. It's easy to forget that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And of course, this also works if someone is trying to target something in their graveyard. Oh, yeah. Anything, by the way. So it could be a Snapcaster Mage, a Torrential Gearhulk, or a Reanimate. Cast Reanimate, targeting that to bring it back out. Noxious Revival, throw it back on top of your library. Now their spell has no target, it fizzles.
Yeah, you can stop like a World Gorger combo, right? They go Animate Dead, target World Gorger. Okay. Because you don't need any mana untapped. You're like, I would like to use this Noxious Revival on my own thing for whatever reasons.
But I also don't want to lose the game.
Yes, but I also don't want that combo to happen. So
wow, that's brutal.
Yeah.
Very, very cool.
So a thing that can definitely save you in certain instances is knowing that Noxious Revival can do that.
Yep.
Okay, we've got a lot more cards you're playing wrong coming right up. In fact, I think we have the single, maybe most confusing card in the history of Magic.
Quite literally why I don't play it in most of my decks. Because
it's so confusing.
Don't want to think about it.
And everyone at the table, every time you play it, goes, wait, what? How does this work again? They all get on their phones.
Yeah.
What is that card? Well, we're going to find out. But first, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. We're going to hear from our sponsors.
This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp Online Therapy.
Hi, everybody. It's me, Chandra. I've been doing this Save the Multiverse thing for a really long time now. Like original Lorwyn Planeswalker long. And don't get me wrong, it's definitely fun sometimes. I mean, I got to channel Fireball and Eldrazi Titan out of existence. That was rad. But it's just one thing after another, It's always, Chandra, burn this.
Chandra, burn that.
Well, I'm feeling burnt out. That's why I turned to BetterHelp for online counseling. See, burnout can take a toll on your life without you even realizing it, making you feel helpless, tired, and unmotivated. But talking to someone really helped me reignite the torch and prioritize my own well-being. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's much more affordable than in-person therapy, and you can be matched with a therapist in under 48 hours. Thanks to therapy, I'm feeling all fired up again. Let's burn stuff!
This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp, and Command Zone listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/CommandZone. That's BetterHelp.com/CommandZone.
Greetings, anointed ones. I am Temet, Vizier of Noctamoon. Here on Amonkhet, summers are brutal. So when the sweltering sun rises to its apex, you must protect yourself from the infernal heat. Thank the gods I have MeUndies to keep me feeling cool. Summer may be sweaty, but with MeUndies' light and breathable micromodal fabric, your hindquarters can stay comfy and cool. They have delightful seasonal prints and many styles to choose from. Available from extra small to 4XL. Bring some tropical bliss to your butt with this festive pineapple print. And if you do venture out for a dip in the oasis, check out their new and improved swimwear styles, like these tropical toucans. MeUndies swimsuits are soft, stretchy, and sustainably made. Finally the summer sun descends beneath the... Wait, hold on. We have a second sun? Are you kidding me?
MeUndies has a great offer for fans of the Command Zone. For any first-time purchasers, you get 15% off. If you sign up for their free-to-join membership, you can apply that 15% off to their already discounted membership prices. To get 15% off your first order and a 100% satisfaction guarantee, go to MeUndies.com/command. Again, that's MeUndies.com/command.
Hey Josh, nice sports date you got there. Shame if someone cast Wrath of God.
Ooh, Boros Charm, indestructible.
Ooh, I got this. Hex.
Veil of Summer, hex-proof.
Well, Cyclonic Rim.
Wow! It's Fairy's protection. Everything's gone. Bye.
How do you always have an answer?
Oh, well, I wouldn't be caught dead without insurance. That's why I use Policy Genius to shop for life insurance. Life insurance isn't just for when you're older. If you have anyone relying on you, like a child, aging parent, or partner, you ought to have it. Luckily, Policy Genius makes it easy to shop for and buy life insurance all in one place. To get started, just click the link in the description or head to policygenius.com/command. Answer some simple questions and they'll hook you up with quotes from top companies so you can find your lowest rate. You can save 50% or more on life insurance by comparing quotes with Policy Genius. And once you've chosen a quote, Policy Genius's team of experts will help you apply for the policy and understand your options. They work for you, not the insurance companies, so you can trust them to offer unbiased advice. Head to policygenius.com/command to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save.
All right, we are back talking about how we are perfect players.
We never make mistakes.
Never made a mistake once, and now we're here to give some of that advice to you because we've seen other people make these mistakes. Never us, no way. Yeah. But this next card is one of the most contentious cards, I think, at our office. We mentioned this card and people will audibly groan. Be like, oh, no, I don't want to think about it.
Every time it gets played, everyone else at the table is like, oh.
What's happening? Are we playing another game, a mini game within this game? And it's like, yeah, this is kind of like Shahrazad, the card.
It's, have you guessed what it is? It's Wheel of Misfortune.
Yeah, very misfortunate that we have to talk about it.
Okay, let me read it. And everyone's going to scratch their head.
It's a good card, by the way.
It is a very good card, actually.
It's just confusing.
That's actually kind of what sucks about it, is because I think all things being equal, you would want to play it from a power level standpoint, but from a confusion standpoint, it makes you not want to play it.
Yep.
All right, Wheel of Misfortune, 2 and a red for a sorcery. Each player secretly chooses a number 0 or greater.
I'm out. What is happening? Secrets?
You didn't even make it through one sentence.
Secrets? Yeah.
So each player secretly chooses a number 0 or greater. Then all players reveal the numbers simultaneously and determine the highest and lowest numbered revealed this way. Wheel of Misfortune deals damage equal to the highest number to each player who chose that number, and each player who didn't choose the lowest number discards their hand, then draws 7 cards. Super confusing. Let's just imagine a scenario where there's 4 players. I play this card. Jimmy chooses 0. I choose 5, and the other 2 players choose 1. We flip our things over. We determine who's got the highest number. That's me with 5. I take 5 damage. And then who's got the lowest number? It's Jimmy with 0. The lowest number does not wheel. Everybody else does. Let's say 2 players had 0. And I was 5 and the other one was 1. Then we would flip over. I would take the 5 damage. Jimmy and the other player that chose 0 would not wheel, and me and the player that chose 1 would.
Yeah, but you're taking the most damage because you put out a higher number than they did, but they were lower than the zeros, so they join you in the wheel club.
All right, let's try and break this down so that it can be simplified. The first thing to ask yourself when this card is played, or if you're the one that plays it, is do I want to wheel? So do I want to discard my hand and draw 7 cards or not.
And many times, for a lot of players that don't like these wheel effects, they'll go, no, I like my hand, I like what's in there, I don't want to, but darn, I have to. This windfall is forcing me to do it, dang.
Yeah, so Wheel of Misfortune is not necessarily forcing you to do it. It's in some way getting the option, and actually, if you do not want to wheel, you will never have to.
Correct.
With Wheel of Misfortune. So if the answer to the question of do I want to wheel is no, you can always guarantee that you will not wheel by just bidding 0 life. Because nobody can bid lower than that, and anybody who ties at the lowest amount bid does not wheel.
Yep.
Okay. It gets complicated, though, if your answer to the question of do I want to wheel is yes.
Yep.
Because then you need to speculate or predict what each of the other players want to do and how badly they want to do it. So once you've answered the question, Wheel of Misfortune gets played. Do I want to wheel? Yes. Now, in general, I would say the higher you bid, the more you want to wheel. So if it's like, I would like to wheel, but I don't need to, you can bid a middling amount. If you're like, I really want to wheel, you have to bid more. And the interesting thing, I think, is the game theory, and this is kind of a forced game theory card, right?
Yeah.
Like, the game theory here is predicting what the other players want to do. And the great thing is, in Magic, players are kind of bad at, disguising information or holding back information, and they will often just tell you, thinking it's an advantage.
I'm going to do this, and that's going to, right? That makes sense, right? So I'm going to play Wheel of Misfortune. I'm going to pay 5 life.
Or they'll just say, I really need to wheel. They'll tell you that.
Yeah.
That's a bad thing to do with this card specifically, but in general, people in Magic are not used to concealing that kind of information. Somebody plays something like a Blightsteel, they'll be like, oh my God, that thing's going to kill me. Nobody's really trying to keep their poker face on all the time in games, but Wheel of Fortune kind of wants you to.
Yeah.
So if you can divine what other players want to do, you'll be in a better position to make a better bid. And a lot of times you can do that by kind of asking or like poking the table, trying to get information about what the other players want to do. And also you do have a data point, I think, that will indicate to you the likelihood of whether they want to wheel, and that's how many cards are in their hand. So in general, if somebody's already got 6 or 7 cards, they're less likely to want to wheel than somebody who has 3 or less, right? Because they're going to just virtually draw 4 more cards.
Or you'll hear them go, oh no. And
Yeah.
you'll be like, wait, let's explain this card. Thanks for telling me you don't want to wheel. And let me work through it. Because we're talking about this situation because if everybody wants to wheel, then you cannot be the lowest bidding number because then you will not wheel.
Right.
So let's say we play this card and everyone's like, great, I freaking love this.
That's the worst because now it's like crap.
How much do I bid? Because if I bid 3 life and everyone else bids 4, 5, and 6, then guess what? You're not wheeling anymore, but they are.
So yeah, the easiest situation is if somebody plays it and it's indicated to you pretty strongly that at least one player does not want to wheel.
And will most likely say 0 when they reveal their secret number.
Yeah, then you know you can bid low because you're just trying to not get the lowest bid and they're probably going to bid 0 to guarantee that they don't.
Even if you bid 1, you're still going to wheel.
Right, so in those cases, depending on how badly you want to wheel and how risk averse you are, you can bid a low amount and generally tend to wheel. But what Jimmy said... and if there's 2 players, obviously, that don't want to wheel,
then
you're in even
really
better
safe,
shape because, they're going to have to both go 0 so that they don't underbid each other. But in the other scenario, the one that Jimmy just talked about, where it's clear everybody wants to wheel, that's where it kind of gets a little bit dicey. So if you do want to wheel, it is often advantageous to somehow subtly project to the rest of the table that you don't want to wheel.
Unless you're the one casting it, by the way. In which case, it's really hard to make that argument.
Right,
Play 3 mana, do nothing. Everyone else gets to wheel. And
I don't want to wheel, but here you all go.
How misfortunate.
But if you are a quick thinker and you have a good poker face, if somebody plays Wheel of Misfortune and you think quickly to be like, oh, I do not want to wheel.
Yeah.
But you do want to wheel? That is a good position to be in because now they think you're not going to wheel.
Oh, great. Jimmy's going to choose 0. Perfect.
So they're all going to bid low.
1, 2, 3.
Exactly, because I already think Jimmy is not going to want to wheel. And you just get in there with like a 4 or 5 or maybe even a 3.
Yeah.
And you go, I'm screwing the person at the bottom. They're not going to wheel.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to take that much damage.
Yeah. Here's the thing. What if you play the spell, everyone looks at it and goes, okay, all right. And one person, let's say you don't want to wheel for whatever reason, but you know that you're the only person that doesn't want to wheel. Do you just bid 1?
Just to mess up the 1?
Because maybe someone's going to be like, perfect, I'm going to bid 1. I know for sure Josh is going to say 0.
Maybe.
What if 3?
It's risky, though.
It's super risky.
But oftentimes, if you don't want to wheel, it's also not that big of a deal if you do.
Right.
Right? You're like, I like my hand, unless you had like both combo pieces in it.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
a lot of times that's just like a preference. Like, I like my hand, but the next 7 cards off the top of my deck, I probably will like too.
Especially if you're like 4 cards in hand. Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing that you do. I think one of them, also a powerful thing you can do is if you do not want to wheel, to project that you do.
Oh.
Because you're kind of screwing somebody into like not getting the easy out of like bidding 4 life. Because we know that if everybody wants to wheel, you have to bid more life in general to guarantee that you do wheel.
Yeah.
And I've seen people bidding like 12, 15 life because they really want to wheel and they do not want to be the person on the bottom. And so if you don't want to wheel, if you, again, can conceal the information from the rest of the table.
I want to wheel.
And indicate like, oh, my hand's really good. I don't think I want to. And then you bid like, 4 or 5.
Then you're screwing everyone that bid 3 or lower. Because there's probably going to be there's going to be one person that bids 2 or 3 and they just get messed up. If 2 people match that lowest bid, then both of them get messed up.
Right. Oh, sorry. I flipped that. If you don't want to wheel and you say,
I want to wheel.
Oh, I really want to wheel. And everybody else does. Now you're really screwing them up because you go, okay, I'm still going to bid only 1 or 0 and not wheel. But they've had to take into account that everybody wants to wheel. And instead of doing like 1, 2, or 3, they've had to bid like 5, 6, 7.
Right.
And they're thinking like, is 7 going to be enough? Like, what if everybody bids 9? No, I better go 10. And then somebody just has to take 15. They were going to wheel anyway.
Yeah.
But you just want to make them cost them 10 more or 15 more life than it was going to.
Yeah. The reason why this card, again, gets an audible groan is we just talked about it's like a prisoner's dilemma. It's like a whole social engineered situation with all of these different scenarios and optimal ways and suboptimal ways to play it, and you're just trying to play a game of Magic the Gathering, dude.
I think, in general, just remembering when you see Wheel of Misfortune, your first instinct should be like, conceal information.
Yeah, don't react, or react in a way. Actually, do you always just react like you want to wheel then?
I think the best way to react is the opposite of what you want to do, if you can think of it in the moment. The second best way to react is not react.
Yeah.
Don't give any information away, and carefully weigh the reaction of everyone else. So that you can say, because what you want to do is be like, they don't know what I'm doing, and I suspect Jimmy wants to wheel, Mel doesn't, and Megan does. And if you have that level of information, you can screw them up by having them misinterpret what you want to do, and get the best deal for yourself by being able to predict what you think they're going to do.
Right. And the third best way to react is to have the player that cast it explain the spell.
Yeah. You should do that anyway, because it gives you a lot of time to gather the information.
And people will react being like, oh, I should bid 4 then. I should bid 3. And you're like, yes, tell me more about what you're going to bid.
Yeah. And you can also be like, if you don't want to wheel, so now you're pretending you do, and they're having those discussions, you can start to throw things in the mix like, but I really want to wheel. What if everybody bids above like 5? I better go for like 7 or 8, huh? What's everybody bidding? And then they don't want to tell you, but you've already pushed their numbers up. But secretly you're bidding 0.
Yeah. That's evil. Oh, lovely.
As long as you don't out and out lie, right? You just want to, after it's done, be like,
yeah, I thought bidding 1 was going to get me there.
I was asking questions. I never said I'm going to bid this much. I
swore this person was going to wheel at 0. Yeah. So you know what? I'm always going to bid at 1 then, I think, for Wheel of Misfortune.
Just always?
Unless I know, right? That
what if you have 2 cards in hand?
Oh, them doing like 7.
Yeah.
10, 12. Yeah. Then everyone just gets into a bidding war. Maybe you play this in a deck that just has absurd amounts of life gain. I don't know.
I think the easiest way to think about it, Wheel of Misfortune hits the table. If you don't want to wheel, you're going to bid 0.
Yep.
And if you do want to wheel, then just think about the fact that like...
you have to be higher than the lowest person.
Yep, that's it.
That's it, yeah.
Yep. Okay. Let's go to the next card.
I don't know. Maybe I don't want to podcast anymore after that. My head hurts.
brain hurts.
All right, next one is one of my new favorite cards. It's Grand Abolisher. Every time I play this thing it does work.
So good.
But the timing of it, important. So white for a 2/2 human cleric. During your turn, opponents can't cast spells or activate abilities of artifacts, creatures, or enchantments. So it says, my turn, y'all can't do nothing. Pretty much anything.
Yep. Now, I think this is one that is more subjective. People understand how this works. There's not a rules confusion surrounding this card. However, I think a lot of people play this incorrectly, play it wrong, in that they play it and they don't take advantage of it. Mm-hmm. They don't. If you play Grand Abolisher onto the table and you then don't proceed to do things that your opponents would want to interact with but now can't because Grand Abolisher's out.
Yeah, then why did you play Grand Abolisher?
Then you did it wrong. Yes, you should be setting this up, and it's usually a later game play. It is not a turn 2 play. It's not just a get it out there for no real reason on turn 5.
Yeah.
It is I'm setting up because I'm going to play this, then play that. And that's either going to win the game on the spot, or it's going to put me in such a huge lead that it will be very difficult for my opponents to come back.
Yeah. It's pretty important to not also aggravate other players. Because let's say I'm before Josh's turn, and Josh is always going to do instant speed stuff right before I pass the turn to him. You play Grand Abolisher, you're going to get them really upset for, and it's not even in a way that's protecting you. You're just adding an enemy to your thing because now it's like, oh crap, well in response to that I have to do everything early. Now every time the turn passes around I have to do it 1 turn early. I don't want to do that. And you're like, great, haha, I hampered him, but for what reason? I'm not doing anything to win the game or do impactful stuff that they can't counter as a result.
And if you put this out and you don't use it right away, you're also projecting that you're probably going to do something scary pretty soon. So people start to formulate a plan of like, okay, on the end step before that player's turn, I'm going to get rid of the Grand Abolisher so that I can interact during their turn. And they know to like leave up more than just 1 removal spell or 1 counter spell or something because they're like, I got to remove Grand Abolisher and then stop whatever they're going to do. Yeah. And they must be about to do something because why did they play Grand Abolisher? So you just telegraphed a play and made them kind of ready for you. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you just hold it in your hand and do it all on the same turn, a lot of times they might be looking at another player and not be scared of you and then be like, oh crap, I can't interact. I was counting on this 1 counterspell in my hand to stop anything that's going to be game winning. And now if I counter the Grand Abolisher, I don't have anything left to stop the rest of the stuff. You force them to have 2 things rather than 1. There's a really good example of this usage, and it's not with Grand Abolisher. She uses Dragonlord Dromoka.
Very similar.
Yeah. It's like, what episode? It's like episode number 5 of Game Nights. Melissa DeTora, I mean, no surprise, one of the great Magic players of all time. She, knows how to sequence things, but she is playing in a game with Prof and me and Jimmy.
Enchantress.
One of the most popular episodes of Game Nights ever. And I'm playing a Nekusar deck, and I have a decent amount of permission style removal and counter spells in the deck, and she knows it. And you can see Melissa throughout the course of that game just very pointedly kind of doing things, but kind of keeping pace without sticking her neck too far out. And then she suddenly has like this turn where she goes, play Dragonlord Dromoka on the end step and force me to like interact at that moment and then turn off my interaction for her turn and basically seals the game in that 1 turn. And she just bided her time, blunted what she could, and just went boom and won all of a sudden on the back of the Dragonlord Dromoka, where I definitely would have been able to stop it if not for that. And she had Dragonlord Dromoka, I'm sure, in her hand for many, many turns and had just been planning out her sequencing to get to that moment.
Yeah, pretty brilliant.
And Grand Abolisher, I think, should normally be used in that way.
Yeah, it's about play Grand Abolisher, do your 7 different things that are going to win you the game. You wrote Mana Geyser, Sneak Attack.
Yep.
Yeah. If you just do that regularly, everyone's going to go counter, kill, destroy, stop it.
Right.
Dragonlord Dromoka, Grand Abolisher says no.
Yeah,
so,
it doesn't have to be comboing out because Melissa does not combo out in that game.
Yeah,
right?
she just puts herself so further ahead at that point that you can't catch up.
Yeah, I think she goes like quarantine field, get rid of all the bad stuff, and then she's able to attack. And at that point, she's like, you guys are so far behind, you can never catch up. And it was because of that one moment that I was able to punch through. So yeah, really important. And I think there's a class of cards or a bunch of cards that if you look at Grand Abolisher and you're playing it wrong because it's sort of this philosophy of don't play it until you can use it or until it's important. There are a bunch of cards that I think fall under this sort of philosophy or category. One of them is like Dragonmaster Outcast.
Oh yeah, even on Game Nights, we've seen people play it on turn 1 and it does nothing. And if there's just an incidental board wipe before they get to the number of lands that they need, then they wasted it.
Yeah, it says at the beginning, it's a 1/1 creature for 1. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 6 or more lands, create a 5/5 red dragon creature token with flying. So yeah, just imagine how telegraphed it is if you play it early. You play it on 1, and everyone knows that it's going to become dangerous in a few turns. And they can see your land count, and they kind of know what you're doing, and maybe you're in a landfall deck or whatever. But in general, around when you have 4 lands, they're going to be like, okay, now I have to start thinking about removing that thing in some way. Now, is that going to be a board wipe for everything? Or is that going to be a removal spell? I mean, I've seen Dragonmaster Outcast get played early, and I think to myself, okay, I've got a board wipe in hand. I'm not going to deploy a bunch of creatures because I do have to kill that thing.
Yeah.
And I might even let them get like 1 dragon and then board wipe. But I'm holding that board wipe. I'm holding that removal spell. I'm ready to kill the Dragonmaster Outcast.
It's also just a 1/1. It's very easy to just incidentally kill with some amount of damage flying around the table.
Yeah, and I'm not going to use it now because it might die to something else.
Yeah.
But even if it doesn't, I will get rid of it before you start getting free dragons.
Yeah. Now, I would say also don't sandbag so hard that you never play stuff out until it's the most optimal. There is going to be a slight rebalance here, but in general, if it's not doing anything for you, you don't care about the 1 damage Dragonmaster Outcast is going to get in for swinging or whatever. It's a 1 mana spell. You will find a way to fit that into your curve later on. Same with Grand Abolisher as a 2 mana spell, and even some of the next ones we're going to talk about.
Yeah, and of course, Dragonmaster Outcast, when it's the only thing on the board, on turn 1 or one of the few things on turn 2 looks a lot more scary than like you play it on turn 6 when you have 6 lands, or turn 5 when you have 6 lands.
Yeah.
There might be other things that just have people's attention, and then they're like, I'm going to let them get a 5/5 dragon because I got to deal with this other thing over there. Whereas if it's turn 3, they might be like, kill that thing because it's kind of the scariest thing at the moment.
Or hey, you have Dragonmaster Outcast, I'm just going to swing at you.
Yeah. Other cards that kind of fit in the same realm, I think Treasonous Ogre is one that you see sometimes where you can pay 3 life and get a red mana. This is the type of spell that you want to play, and you want to be like, have a plan. I'm spending 21 life this turn. I'm spending 30 life this turn to get 10 red mana and immediately use it. Again, it doesn't have to be combo, but it's probably going to be to set yourself up in an explosive play that puts you in an insurmountable lead or hard to surmount, I suppose.
Yep. Viscerous here is another great one. It's a sack outlet, but if you're just playing it out there by itself, then all you can do is sack it to itself. Not that great. You want to be able to use this. And again, just because it's a 1 mana spell, you can fit it into your curve later. You don't have to optimally play it out as soon as you need to.
Yeah. Viscerous here often gives you the free sack outlet you need to make something else work.
Yeah.
And putting it out on the battlefield and making it vulnerable before you've got the other pieces doesn't make sense. So because it's 1 mana, it's often like set up the other stuff. Then they look around, they go, well, it's not really a worry until they have a sack outlet. And you go, sack outlet that only costs 1, do way more stuff than you thought I was going to.
Add instant speed.
Yeah. Very powerful. I think Lightning Greaves can often fall into this category. Now, it is useful to play and put onto your commander and protect it. But I think there's a lot of play patterns, and I've definitely stolen games by, like, I draw Lightning Greaves kind of later in the game. My commander's already protected for some other reason, or I don't care that much if it dies, and I wait and deploy it in an attrition-y game as like a play creature, play Lightning Greaves, put Lightning Greaves on it, swing at you, or do something that...
Haste.
Yeah, and a lot of decks, you look at them... Think of how many times you've been in a game where you've thought to yourself, like, okay, should I leave something back to block, or should I do this?
I'm going to be fine, right?
They're not even in red. So
right.
What's the chances that they have haste? And you're thinking to yourself, well, if they had Swiftfoot or Lightning Greaves in their hand, I already would have seen it. So... and those are 1 or 2 cards in their deck. What are the chances they draw it? I can be vulnerable to that one thing that seems like it's unlikely to happen. Yeah, and so you can get people in those moments where they're at 10 or 7 or something, and they didn't expect you to be able to just attack and kill them.
Or even they put up 1 blocker, but now you can create another one, or even throw out a fly or whatever it is that can get that haste.
Yep.
Yeah.
So... yeah, think of holding Lightning Greaves like that sometimes.
This next one is a new card. It's very complicated because a card like this has never been printed before, thanks. And it's actually something that I think...
Oh, wait. Before we get to that, there's one more. We skipped it.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. It's not on the thing because we know what they do. I think also in this category of don't play until you can use cards are Mana Crypt and Soul Ring.
Yes, Mana Crypt on turn 1, if you're not planning on instantly using it to pop out 2 other mana rocks or get a card out early, is going to probably Craig Blanchett kill you over the course of the game if you're not careful. Well, you can't predict it, right, because it's a coin flip. But a lot of times I've seen people just playing it out, and that's the worst, right? Turn 1 Soul Ring, everyone's like, oh shoot, there it goes. Turn 2, 1 drop, 2 drop. It's like, wait, you're not using all that extra mana? Why'd you even play the Mana Crypt out? And now it's just going to potentially lightning bolt you every turn.
And it also puts a target on you, right? Like, I'm way more likely to attack the Mana Crypt player than I am to attack somebody who doesn't have a Mana Crypt turn 1 or 2. And in fact, we did those stats episodes a couple years ago now, and we found something that I think was counterintuitive at the time, but has become more clear to me as probably correct over time, is that a turn 1 through 3 Soul Ring or Mana Crypt actually lowers your win percentage,
right?
Because you become the perceived threat earlier in the game than the other players are, and you don't. I think the best way to win games of Commander, and we get people on our Discord or email, Twitter, and stuff, will often sort of contact us and say things like, "I just can't seem to win games," or "I've stopped winning games," or "I haven't won in a long time." And I don't want to build a competitive EDH deck, but like, what's something I'm doing wrong? And usually the thing we'll tell them is like, you're probably becoming the threat too early in the game. The best, easiest way to win games of Commander, and I will default to this strategy when I really want to get a win, which is just keep your head low. Just don't appear powerful.
Don't be too flashy.
And think of the last game nights, the Streets of
Ned,
yeah. Spoiler alert if you haven't seen it, but Ned loses a land early. He's down on red. He doesn't look scary. He's well behind the other players, and of course he ends up winning in the end. And that's because that position is very strong because no one's looking at you.
Yeah, and also people are even like willing to like do you some favors, cut some deals with you or whatever.
They feel bad for you.
Yeah.
So if you have Soul Ring and Mana Crypt early, you can become the default target. And so unless you can take advantage of those things, and we're not saying necessarily hold them if you could spend the mana.
Yeah.
But unless you can, I think it's often correct to just wait, because a Soul Ring you play on turn 4 or 3,
Still
you're probably not
pretty
holding
good.
it that long. But
It's also still great. You're still mana positive. And Mana Crypt, by the way, is 0 mana, so you can really play it whenever you want.
I've had games where I have an Arcane Signet in my hand and a Soul Ring in my hand, and I hold the Soul Ring and I go, turn 2 Arcane Signet, don't do anything, and turn 3, oh, look, I pretend I drew my Soul Ring, and it's somehow just not, it doesn't like bleep on the radar the same amount as if I turn one into Arcane Signet turn 1. You know, I find that I win very few of those games where I go land, Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, and I win a lot more of the games where I go land, Arcane Signet, turn 3, Soul Ring, cast something. I've still gotten a lot out of it. Not maximum amount, but I'm not as scary.
Yeah, and again, this applies to what your meta is. If you need to play that out in turn 1 to win or to even stand a chance, then you should. But
try sandbagging it a little. I bet you'll be surprised with the results. It feels bad. You'll feel like, okay, I lost, 3, maybe 4 mana in the early turns. But sometimes it's easily made up by the fact that you just they're looking at somebody else and worried about somebody else and not you.
Yep, and again, Soul Ring is mana positive, so even if you play it on a later turn, you're gaining mana as a result.
Yeah, Crypt's mana positive too.
Yeah, Crypt's definitely mana positive.
Okay, now on to the new card we were about to talk about.
Yeah, so this is the first time we've ever seen a card like this. It is Urza's Saga. I'll read it. It's an enchantment land, and so as this saga enters, and after your draw step, add a lore counter, and then you sacrifice it after the third lore counter is added. So you play this land, and then boop, it triggers, and the first lore counter goes on, and it says Urza's Saga gains add a colorless mana tap. So it becomes a regular colorless land tapping it. On your second turn, after you draw a step, it says Urza's Saga gains 2 mana, tap, create a 0/0 colorless construct artifact creature token with this creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control. And on the third time, when the third lore counter is added, it says search your library for an artifact card with mana 0 cost or 1, put it on the battlefield, and then shuffle. And then you sacrifice the land as well.
Yeah, whenever a saga hits its last chapter, you always get the effect and sack it.
Yep. So what people don't understand is that these effects actually stack on top of each other. So this land gets better, but it still can do the things it did the first turn it came out.
Yeah, so I think, and I made this mistake on one of the Game Nights episodes, it's easy to sort of get lost and get excited, I'm going to go find my Soul Ring or whatever. On that third turn especially, you can still tap it before it goes away, and you can either get a colorless mana out of it, which you definitely should do, because these things trigger after you draw your card, so you're in your main phase.
Yep.
But you could also activate and make the construct.
2 mana, tap it, give it a 0/0. And the whole point is that is what the card is trying to do. That is the actual play pattern they're trying to build out here.
Yeah, so you don't have to do that chapter 2 activation, but a lot of people just forget to use it at all. So they just goes to chapter 3, sack it, go get my artifact, put it into play, and you're down 1 mana if that's what you chose to do.
Yeah, because you could just tapped it and add a colorless and then use that for your Sensei's Divining Top or whatever it is that comes out.
Yep. Just use it to cast whatever spell you want. So don't forget that third chapter on Urza Saga, you're still allowed to use the other 2 modes before you sack it.
Yeah, those 2 modes have added permanent lines of text to the card. So don't forget to use it.
Yep.
If you can, if you have the mana and it makes sense for you to.
All right, the next one's an interesting one, and it has to do with things that have affinity for artifacts. Or Emry, Lurker of the Loch, is a card that doesn't say affinity, but it still does.
The same, yeah.
Yeah, this spell costs 1 less to cast for each artifact you control. And this is a rules thing that a lot gets confusing, and I feel like I've looked it up in games like multiple times, because it's like you look it up, and then a few months later it happens, you're like, I forget.
Yeah, did that work that way? Yeah.
Yeah, so what you can do, this is like affinity for artifacts plus treasure tokens, let's say. So let's imagine you have the card Thoughtcast, which is 4 and a blue for a sorcery, has affinity for artifacts, so it costs 1 less to cast for each artifact you control, and it says draw 2 cards. Let's imagine that you have 2 treasure tokens and 3 islands.
Okay.
Now the question is, can I play Thoughtcast, and how much does it cost?
Because, am I going to use the treasures to crack and pay for this? But they also count towards the affinity, so how do I calculate this correctly?
Right. So the way that you cast spells in Magic is you propose casting of this spell. We learned about this with Selvala recently, right? How you can propose to cast something off Selvala, then tap her, flip the cards off the library. Sorry, it's the white-green Selvala.
Yeah.
And then find out, I didn't have enough mana after all, so the card... You don't get to cast it, goes back to your hand.
Yeah.
But the proposal happens before you pay for it. So you go, okay, I'm going to propose to cast Thoughtcast. It goes, you have 2 treasure tokens. This thing's only going to cost
less.
Yeah, this is only going to cost 3. And you go, okay, cool. Now I'm going to sack the 2 treasure tokens and tap 1 land. And it doesn't ask again, there's no other time to check the cost. So yes, you can use your treasure tokens to cast Amory, to cast Thoughtcast.
And to reduce it at the same time.
Correct.
Yeah. So you have it out, announce you're doing it, check how much it's going to cost, and then at that point, you're free to do whatever. Those artifacts, you could blow them up, you could sacrifice them, but they've already reduced the cost of the affinity spell.
Yeah, you can play them. Well, you can't like blow them up or anything, right? Because you still are in the midst of casting a spell. Nothing can interrupt that, but it's the next step in the thing.
Yeah, if they somehow disappeared, though, the cast reduction has already been like, this is how much you need to pay based on what we looked at the board state.
All right, let's talk about the next one.
Yeah, so this is Vandalblast, a very popular card. It costs 4 and a red, just kidding. It costs 1 red for a sorcery that says destroy target artifact or you don't control, and then you can overload it for 4 and a red, and then it's destroy every artifact you don't control. So it's like a board wipe for artifacts for 5 mana, which is what most people read Vandalblast as.
And I think that is correct a high percentage of the time. Maybe 90% of the time you should be casting the overload. But I feel like I never see anybody cast it for just 1 red. Like, it's almost like they don't even know that mode exists.
Yeah, why would you when you could cast it for 5 and blow up everyone else's artifacts? That's so much better than just blowing up 1, right?
Yeah, and I would ask yourself, am I ever playing this for 1? Because there has to be some moments where that is the correct thing to do. There's really, there's multiple artifacts out, but it's really better for me to still be able to play my 5-drop this turn.
Yeah, as well as a Vandalblast.
And there's really only one artifact that's really, really scary.
Yeah.
There's also artifacts where I think people are like, oh, there's an artifact, it's a Soul Ring, let's say. It's very scary early. But I don't want to use my Vandalblast on it. I'd rather use it later because I might catch 5 or 6 things. But by the time you catch 5 or 6 things, yes, you get their Soul Ring, but they've already tapped it 3 or 4 times over the course of turns and gotten 6 mana out of it. And so the amount of value they've gotten out of that artifact actually surpasses the amount of value you get out of like 5 for winning the table or whatever.
Yeah.
And you probably would have had a better chance to win some of those games by just getting rid of that Soul Ring early or something like that.
Yeah, and sometimes Vandalblasting makes a lot of enemies for you around the table too. And there have been cases where it's like, shoot, I need a Vandalblast right now, but I need you to also have your stuff open, but I can't have them. Oh, crap. Well, sorry, here we go.
Yep.
And you actually kind of put yourself as a disadvantage sometimes when you cast it because you're getting rid of an ally potentially.
And we're using Vandalblast here, but I think there are other cards that kind of are similar to this thought process. So like Cyclonic Rift.
Yeah, you can cast it for just 1 in the blue.
And I would say, I think this is true, I've cast Cyclonic Rift more than Vandalblast for its non-overloaded cost.
Oh, I for sure have.
Which is funny because I would say Cyclonic Rift is way more powerful and game-winning on its overloaded side, whereas Vandalblast is debilitating, but it doesn't often just outright win you the game the way Cyclonic does. But at the same time, because of I think it's because of the instant speed part of it, is like, oh, if you're going to die otherwise, you will cast Cyclonic Rift for its 2 mana.
Yeah, to bounce that creature attacking you or whatever it is.
Yeah, somebody gets a Blightsteel out with haste on you, you're going to be like, yeah, well, do I want to die or do I want to use this suboptimally? I will live.
Yeah.
Vandalblast doesn't give you that opportunity because it's a sorcery.
Right.
I think Capsize is another one, and cards with buyback and things where people just
I need to pay this for 6 mana. I can't do it for just 1 blue.
Yeah, I think Capsize in particular becomes way better in your deck the moment that you realize that like 50% of the time, you're just going to Capsize with no buyback.
Yeah.
You are just like going to do it as a tempo spell or a setback spell or remove a key permanent that's making their value engine go.
Yeah.
And you're going to be like fine with it. Like I wish I could buy it back every time, but I'm not only going to do that when I play it.
Right.
Yep. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
Okay. Yeah. I think that this card's also, it should, if it's 10% of the time Vandalblast, it should be higher if you have Archaeomancer in your deck.
To rebuy stuff,
Mystic Sanctuary.
Noxious Revival.
Yeah, exactly. If Regrowth and Eternal Witnesses, right?
Yeah.
Like, if somebody plays a turn 1 Soul Ring or something like that, and you have Vandalblast in your hand, and you think through your deck, and you're like, I have 3 or 4 ways to get this back, you should be firing it off early.
Yep.
Especially if you have a turn where, like, 1 red mana is otherwise just going to be sitting there.
Yeah.
Might as well set somebody back, keep the table even, and it's not even like you can't get it back later if you really, really need it.
Yep. I like that. Yeah, definitely think about what you're doing and also the impact it's not going to have just now, but over the next 4 or 5 turns. If someone has that artifact that's just going nuts and you get rid of it now, then you are causing them to get severely behind because you're actually trying to project into the future.
All right, the next one's kind of related to the Sylvan Library thing, but I did want to bring it up because I think we make assumptions on our show sometimes, and newer, less experienced players maybe don't always know the foundational level of stuff, so that won't make sense to them. So admittedly, a lot of experienced players will already know this. This is one of the more obvious things, but Brainstorm is a card that you do see sort of novice players play quote unquote wrong.
Suboptimally.
And a lot of them don't even understand like why it's kind of one of the most powerful spells in the history of Magic. Like, you know, a lot of legacy decks are sort of built around the fact that Brainstorm exists. Do you want to read it, Jimmy?
Yeah, so it's 1 blue mana for an instant, draw 3 cards, then put 2 cards from your hand on top of your library in any order. So first things first, this is not a card draw spell in the way that you might think, because you don't end up with more cards than you did before. You play Brainstorm, that's 1 card out of your hand. You draw 3 cards, cool, I'm up 3, but then you put 2 back, you're actually at the same amount of cards you just had.
Yeah, it's card selection. It does cantrip. You can put 2 cards back that weren't part of the 3 that you drew.
Yep. It could be the worst cards in your hand or that 8-drop you'll never cast.
So it does really do a lot of things that tend to make it powerful, but one of the most powerful things about it is you get to choose 2 cards out of all the cards you've got and shuffle them away.
Yeah.
And that requires a shuffle effect. So Brainstorm really is at its best in conjunction with fetch lands, tutors. If you know you're going to shuffle the same turn or before you're going to draw again, because otherwise Brainstorm's not that great. You look at a bunch of cards, you put 2 cards back, and then you just draw one of those cards. So if it's like, okay, I don't need that many lands, and I put 2 lands there, so what? You're still going to draw them over the course of the next 2 turns.
Yep. Same thing goes for Scroll Rack. It's like, I don't want these cards in my hand anymore. Well, guess what? You just put them in the order in your library that you're going to draw them again, unless you can get them out of there. Kick them out the gate.
These cards can actually feel really bad because you go, all right, look, and I know what my next 2 draw steps are, and it's not great. You know what I mean? So you're like, now it's 3 turns before anything new can happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that obviously Brainstorm is still fine sometimes to play in a pinch.
Or if you have like Alhammar's Archive, again,
and
you're just drawing cards. Yeah.
I really hope the top 3 cards in my library have something good, a certain thing I'm looking for. Get me going. But in general, you're going to want to hold these cards and play them when you can maximize. And the way to maximize is I'm picking 2 cards out of all the cards I have after I Brainstorm, and I'm getting rid of them for good, quote unquote, because I'm shuffling it away.
Yeah, even if you draw the 3 cards of Brainstorm and go, crap, I don't want any of those cards, you can just put those back on the library and shuffle. And that's basically like you're scrying 2 with Brainstorm, as opposed to, well, I just can kind of predict my future for a little bit.
Yeah. Think of Urza Saga, right? It's got that 3rd chapter.
Yeah.
If I know I've got Urza Saga out, I do not want to play my Brainstorm on turn 2. I'll do something else, and then on turn 3, in response to that trigger, Brainstorm.
Or even before the trigger, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't even matter.
Get rid of 2 cards when I shuffle to find that 1 or 0 mana artifact.
Yeah. Or sometimes it could even be like, oh crap, I have that 1 or 0 mana artifact in my hand, or 1 mana artifact in my hand. I just put it back, Brainstorm. Yeah, that's a little fancy.
That's high level. I like
that. Okay, the next one is I remember when we saw it, we even have a background of this art. It's Cabal Stronghold. It is misunderstood and people think it's more powerful than it actually is. It's a land, you tap it for colorless, or you can pay 3 mana and tap it to add black for each basic swamp you control. And it's like, oh wow, this is so cool, because you can actually just tap the land for colorless too, so it's not just a dead land, and then I get to Cabal Coffers. Nice.
Yeah. I think I've seen multiple people just not understand that this doesn't work with Urborg.
Yeah.
Because it says for each basic swamp you control.
Whoops.
Yeah. So the lands have to be basic swamps, and in general, I've actually found that is a big enough downside that really only mono black decks want Cabal Stronghold, and not even all the time, because sometimes I'm running like 15 utility lands.
Yeah, and definitely you basically don't play this in 2-color decks, because it doesn't matter if you have your black-white land that says Swamp Plains on it, that doesn't count as a basic swamp. So Cabal Stronghold, it very rarely will get you, because you have to tap 3 and that land. So you have to generate more than 4 mana with the blacks.
For it to be worth it.
For it to be worth it, yeah.
How often do you have 5 basic swamps in play? It's very rare.
Maybe in your Relentless Rats, legendary,
there you go.
Just rat deck, yeah.
There you
but
go.
even then, you're in mono black. You don't even have ways to get more lands out, so it's just tough to get this online after a certain point.
All right, we are almost at the end. We got one more. It's not a card. We're cheating a little here.
It's an effect.
There are cards that do this, but the thing that players are doing wrong involves looting. So the cards I think we see kind of. Bag of Holding is a card we see a decent amount these days. Jason's Prodigy is one. There's a bunch of cards.
Merfolk Looter.
Yeah, there's a Teferi that does, well, a bunch of Teferis, but Teferi, the
newest one.
The one that can activate on other players' turns.
Yep.
So looting is the act of drawing a card and then discarding a card. So Bag of Holding is 1 mana for an artifact. It says whenever you discard a card, exile that card from your graveyard. Then you can pay 2, tap it, draw a card, then discard a card, and then you can pay 4, sack the Bag of Holding, and return all exiled cards with Bag of Holding to their owner's hand. So it's that second ability you'll see people use. Jason's Prodigy just taps to draw a card and then discard a card, then turns into a Planeswalker, depending on how many cards you have.
Merfolk Looter is the easiest, simplest one. It's just tap, draw, draw a card, discard a card.
So Less experienced players, I think, tend to hesitate about looting and sometimes don't do it. And there's an old sort of philosophy or idiom in Magic, which is always loot.
It is 99% of the time, it is correct to loot. Even if you're like, I love all 5 cards in my hand, I wouldn't change a thing about them. You should still loot.
You probably don't know your deck well enough to actually answer that question if you have 5 cards in hand.
Yeah.
So there's likely to be a few cards in your deck that if you drew them, you'd be like, actually, I'd rather have that than this.
Yeah.
And then even worst case scenario, you just discard the card that you drew into your graveyard. Almost all decks, that is going to be a plus, right? There are almost no decks that don't have any ways to interact with their own graveyard.
Yeah.
So a lot of times you'll be like, oh, I have a reanimate spell in my deck. I have, a Snapcaster or a Torrential Gearhulk. So I'm going to get rid of one of my instants because I might draw a Snappy or Torrential Gearhulk.
Or this card has something that allows me to play it from my graveyard. It has flashback on it. Or I have a bunch of cards that have Delve, like Treasure Cruise and all that stuff.
Oh, yeah. If you have a Treasure Cruise in your deck, you should be looting as much as possible, right?
Yeah. But even if you don't have any of those cards, you're still getting to see an additional card, right? Think about how many cards you draw over the game. If everyone only draws the cards they draw in their draw set, but you have a looter, you could potentially draw twice as many cards as the next player. And that means you get to see twice as many cards, make twice as many decisions. It's the same as it's a Necropotence argument. It's all those same things. You want to see more Sylvan Library. You want to see more cards so you can get through your library and choose the best ones for each situation. It's a singleton format. You don't have that consistency of knowing I have 4 copies of this in my deck. It's like, no, you need to keep churning through your deck so you can craft a hand that matches what's going on and can respond to the table as well.
Yeah, really, really well said. I think the only circumstance I can consider where you would not loot is where you have one part of a combo piece in your hand.
Yeah, it's your only card.
And that's your only card. Because what if I draw the second part of that combo piece, now I have to discard the first part and I can't make that work.
Yeah.
So I'd rather draw that as my...
Yeah, it is tough to loot when you have just one card in hand because then you're asking, all right, if I draw a card that's better than this, but not that much better, but I want both, then what do I do? So I think 2 cards in hand is loot every single time because you can get through lands, you can get through so much.
And still most of the time, if you only have one, still loot because...
Yeah, you might draw a land and discard that one.
Yeah, wouldn't you rather draw the land that you were going to draw for a turn, discard it, and then when you draw for a turn, you've gotten too deep now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the card in my hand, if I only have one card, if it's not in the top 10% of cards in my deck, I'm probably looting because worst case scenario, I'm going to discard the card that I loot. But if I have a good chance of upgrading my card, even if I have, I think LSV and has written an article about this, and a lot of pros have talked about it, and they have said things like, even if I have my second
and Karsten and stuff, yeah,
if I have my second best card in my whole deck in my hand, I'll still loot because what if I get my first best card?
Right.
And in Commander, I think it's a little bit different because, like you said, I would rather have my first and second. So if I have my second best card in my whole deck in my hand, the chances that the next one's my first best are
not so great considering, again, you don't have 4 copies of each card. It's harder to have that consistency.
But even then, if I did draw it, I would be mad to get rid of my second best card. I'd rather just have both. So maybe I would just be like, okay, I'm good here.
Yeah.
But in general, I think if the card in my hand I don't deem to be in the top 10% of cards in my deck, I'm definitely looting because I have a high chance of being able to upgrade it. And worst case scenario, I look at the card, it's not as good, and I just dump that into my graveyard. And now I have the chance of drawing my first best card in my deck and the next, draw step.
Yep. However, there is a distinction between looting and rummaging. Rummaging is the effect where you discard a card and then draw a card. Very different, because typically you want to look at the card you're drawing and then make a decision, as opposed to, well, I'm going to discard something and hopefully the thing on top of my deck is better.
Yeah, that's a really good point. If something, red usually rummages and blue loots.
Yeah.
So yeah, red has all these effects that are like discard first and then draw. This is a totally different thing. And I think you don't always do that at all, because you can look at your hand and be like, if I discard one of these and in place of it I get a land, how happy am I? If it's not that happy, then you often don't want to do it.
Yeah, unless it's like I need to pitch lands to draw something better, that's a more optimal case. Or if you have madness, or if you have all those graveyard effects.
Yeah, but in general, if you're rummaging away lands or things that aren't useful, like a mana rock late in the game or something like that.
Yeah. I would say though that discarding stuff to the graveyard and it has additional utility when it hits the graveyard is one of the most satisfying things you can do, because you feel like you're not actually losing that card.
Yeah.
And you have access to it later, and sometimes you can surprise your opponents because they didn't realize that, oh yeah, that thing was sitting in your graveyard the whole time.
Yeah, it's just like having an extra card or extra cards in your hand.
Yeah.
Extra options.
All right.
To the listeners, What are some cards that you see players often play wrong?
Yeah, because we know that you don't want to admit that you might be playing some cards.
Right. I'm asking for a friend. I'm telling a story about a friend who played a card wrong. I would never play anything wrong.
I would never. It's a cautionary tale to everyone else out there. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of that out there. We'd love to see if there's some other fringe case scenarios or rules interactions or just strategies that you find that people are not doing correctly or yourself and that you've learned from or that you have some ideas about. Let us know in the comments. You can tweet at us. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, all that stuff. Really have a conversation with the people in the comments. That's one of the best parts about our comment section. It's very friendly. Everyone's just always putting out ideas, and you can learn so much just by sort of going through there, and adding a comment is, it's good for the algorithm too. Thumbs up.
Yeah, I just selfishly want people to do that because there's a good chance that in a couple of years we do a follow-up episode with a bunch more cards. And
we'll look through that comment section.
For sure, you can help us with the show. So
Or on Discord too, if you're on our Patreon, definitely check out the Discord. Great place to talk with a lot of really experienced Magic players.
All right, if you want to get your hands on Magic cards, you're Magic players, you're going to buy Magic cards, you may as well just use our affiliate link, which is channelfireball.com/command. They have an awesome marketplace full of licensed businesses and LGSs, so you're dealing with licensed professionals. They're going to get you your cards to you super fast, in great condition. They have really awesome prices, especially on sealed product.
And good customer service, because that's their business.
Yep, so Streets of New Capenna stuff, if you haven't got all yours, I haven't even ordered any yet.
No,
I
not
need
yet.
to get some. And then Commander Legends, I'm probably just going to get Commander Legends and Streets of New Capenna at the same time at this point.
That's a good call.
Yeah. And then, of course, Channel Fireball also back to hosting live events. Jimmy and I and almost our entire Command Zone crew are going to be at CommandFest Las Vegas, June 10th through the 12th. If you are able at all to make it to any of the live events, this one particularly would be awesome because you can meet us, hopefully get in some games with us. We'll be on the convention hall all 3 days playing games. But even if you're not maybe in that region of the country or it's far for you, check out the other CommandFest happening in your area. We'll put a link in the show. Yeah, there's some all over the United States, so hopefully there's one close enough that you can get to. We'll put links in the show notes so you can find out more info.
We talked a lot about how people are playing cards wrong, but one thing we didn't mention is that you're also playing cards wrong if you're not doing it on the playmat.
Right, or in an Ultra Pro sleeve.
Yeah, exactly. Ultra Pros are other sponsor, and they do, I'm being totally serious here. They do help you play the game right because you need to protect your cards when you're playing them. You need to play them onto a surface that's not going to get them dinged up. And playmats, sleeves, deck boxes. These are all the correct way to bring your cards to different events, to prepare your draft set when you go to draft, to have those sleeves ready in an Ultra Pro box, in the Satin Tower, whatever it is. Ultra Pro has you hooked up. They have ways to even track your life total, tokens on the battlefield. One thing, we should mention this, people don't play tokens right. They're like, I'm just going to use this dice, and it's a tap and a tagging, but this one doesn't have haste, so I'm going to use this one over here.
You really need cards to represent the tokens.
Token. They have, Ultra Pro has those relic tokens. They've got lots of different stuff for you. They have the dice that have the Planeswalker things on them.
Yep.
They've got everything. You can also go to shop.ultrapro.com/command and shop directly from their site and get what you need to play the game even more right than before.
Yeah, if you are going to a live event, something like Satin Towers are like so important because you don't want your decks in like boxes that are loose or can open up.
Yeah.
I've definitely seen people that like drop their backpack and their cards go everywhere. That is the worst thing that could happen.
100 card pickup, way worse than 52 card pickup.
And often at like security going through the airports and stuff, they'll require you to take them out and open them up and things like that. So there are these moments where like you want the right equipment when you're specifically traveling.
Yeah.
Because
that's a great point.
Yeah, you can lose your cards or they can get damaged if you're not careful. So having the right accessories for your gaming stuff is even more important when you're traveling.
Yeah, when you bring it to the convention hall, you want to have it in the thing that's going to be the most convenient for you. And also they can keep track of. That's not like 3 heavy backpacks, right? Like Ultra Pro has all that gear and more. So before you head out to Command Zone Vegas or wherever it is, CommandFest Vegas, suit yourself up with the good gears.
Command Zone Vegas, it's just our event. It's going to feel like that. We got like 20 people going.
Yeah. All right.
Special thanks to our amazing team here at the Command Zone: Damon Lenz, Shauna Gillis, Arthur Meadowcroft, Ashlyn Rose, Lady Danger, Manson Lung, Craig Blanchett, Josh Murphy, Jake Boss, Patrick Nan, Jordan Pridgeon, Sam Waldo, Grav Galati, Truck Ty, Jamie Block, Mitch Trafford, and Evan Limburger.
And big thanks as always to Jeffrey Palmer, who's doing amazing things on his Twitter at LivingCardsMTG. He does awesome card animations, and he's really good at Photoshop, so you should check it out.
Yeah. Thanks, Jeffrey. You can find him on Twitter at LivingCardsMTG. You already said that, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. But you can say it again, LivingCardsMTG.
All right, everybody. Thanks for watching.
And we'll see you next time.
Peace.
Thank you for your attention. For further inquiries, send an email to commandcast@rocketjump.com or ask us on Twitter at JFWong and at Josh Lee Kwai. See you later, alligator.
Greetings, humans.